And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, once again for joining our platform today across the Louisiana plain, where we are elevating the cause of constitutional conservatism, advancing the cause of freedom and liberty in Louisiana, and slowly but surely draining the Louisiana swamp. My name is Chris.
And I'm Danielle, and this is the State of Freedom. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. We just can't say enough how much we appreciate you taking out some of your time to just spend with us, and we hope that you're enjoying it. Today, we'll be going through the House elections, what happened on Saturday in the House. There was just too much to pack into one episode to make this all come together, but we're really looking forward to looking at that with y'all. And if you are looking for a way to support us, to advertise with us, or to send your feedback, please do that at our website, freedomstate.us. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love any recommendations you have on show ideas or guests. Yeah, we just want to hear from you. So please do drop us a line. You can also do that at info@freedomstate.us. Well, let's get into the scripture of the day. Today it is Psalm chapter 32, verses 6 through 9. And it says, "This is what I've learned through it all. All believers should confess their sins to God. Do it every time God has uncovered in you in the time of exposing. For if you do this, when sudden storms of life overwhelm, you'll be kept safe. Lord, you are my secret hiding place, protecting me from these troubles, surrounding me with songs of gladness. Your joyous shouts of rescue release my breakthrough. I hear the Lord saying, I will stay close to you, instructing and guiding you along the pathway for your life. I will advise you along the way and lead you forth with my eyes as your guide. So don't make it difficult. Don't be stubborn when I take you where you've not been before. Don't make me tug you and pull you along. Just come with me." And what I got from that was the key to a successful life and a clean conscience is just keeping our hearts pure before the Lord. Jesus made the ultimate sacrifice. He gave his life in place of ours. So why would we try and hide our faults and sins or carry them around because we don't feel worthy to release them to him? Someone once told me that it's actually a great arrogance to hold on to the burden of our sin with the excuse that we're unworthy of forgiveness, because if Jesus said it is finished, then it's finished. If he said your sins are forgiven, who are we to argue with that? Is our sin greater than his love or sacrifice? Absolutely not. It's not. He is always greater. So our job is to humble ourselves and give it to him. And in doing so, we will experience the freedom that he bought for us. And then we can live in that freedom and follow his leading to the adventures and the life that he has for us. Life isn't meant to be as hard as we sometimes make it out to be. All we need to do is obey the Lord and follow his lead. It might not be easy, but it's not complicated. So that's my encouragement today.
You know, Danielle, when you said early on in the prayer that when we confess our sins deeply before the Lord, then he sets us free, then he leads us on the right path. Sometimes it can be very, very difficult to do that. Sometimes it can be very difficult to be completely honest and completely bare before the Lord. That it requires a lot of vulnerability and it's hard to do. But there is a great, great result of that, which is that we open ourselves up more fully to his mercy, and then he leads us down the path of victory. But it's interesting the connection between being completely honest before the Lord, which can be very difficult, and the fruits of that, which are favor, victory, success, reward, and a greater intimacy with God. That's so powerful.
It is. And I just think the freedom from that burden, because when we're carrying stuff around like that, when we're carrying around regret, when we're carrying around fear, it takes a toll on us. And that energy is needed to do other work. And it's not available to us if we are
Yes.
not, living in freedom. So I think we have everything we need. It's just a matter of actually giving ourselves access to it by being honest with the Lord.
Absolutely. And speaking of being free to do other work, we
There's so much work, Chris.
we have been so free. It's absolutely unbelievable the freedom to work
The
that we've been granted here. It's like the Lord has been so liberal in bestowing upon us opportunities to work. I am so thankful for the opportunities that we've had, and I'm very
Yeah.
thankful, Danielle, for the successes that we had in these house races, these critical house races, in which we endorsed candidates who either won or who have advanced to a runoff. A number of candidates that we endorsed did not make it, but nonetheless, as we said before, we don't endorse principally based upon the likelihood of victory. We endorse based upon fidelity to constitutional conservatism. And that is the primary basis. And so we may not always have a 100% winning record, but when we endorse a candidate, our listeners and Louisiana citizens will know that, in our view, they are the preferable candidate when it comes to advancing principles that we believe in.
Yes. And as we're looking at today, the House races, the outcomes, let me just kind of start out with a couple of numbers for you. So 48 members of the House ran unopposed. And so we started out already with 31 Republicans automatically making it into the House. We endorsed quite a number of candidates, and 11 of the races that we endorsed in were victories, 11 were losses, and 5 made it to the runoffs.
Yes, and the way I look at runoffs, the five candidates that we endorsed and helped who made it into the runoff, they were not all expected to get in to a runoff, and so I always consider candidates who we support who get into a runoff. That's a victory. We helped advance these good candidates into the playoffs. Now it's time to win the playoff round and make sure that it gets done on November 18th. So I look at it as really a record of 16-11, that we won 16 and we lost 11 of them, which isn't a bad record, and one that I'm proud to stand on. I can't wait to go through some of these races.
I know folks need to buckle up because there's obviously a lot of races with those numbers. So why don't we just start out with House District 1? That is the freedom loving, Second Amendment supporting, promoting Danny McCormick. He got 66% of the vote against his Republican opponent, and we're so thrilled for him. We're so thrilled for us.
Right up in North Louisiana there, Danielle. And Danny McCormick came on our show early on when we first launched the State of Freedom. We had a great interview with him. We talked about his advocacy of fundamental gun rights, Second Amendment. He's been a big advocate of the Second Amendment in the legislature. And Danny is one of these guys who will always be willing to stand alone if he has to on principle. I can't think of any more stalwart conservative in the legislature than Danny McCormick. I'm so glad we supported him and advanced him. And we've just got to have him back on the show to talk again. And I know one thing he's going to do. He's going to bring his Second Amendment concealed carry legislation in the next term. I'm going to strongly urge him to do that.
I don't think you'll need to.
I think you're right. I don't think
I think he's prepared to do so. He's locked and loaded on that one.
No, I was passing by the Capitol yesterday and I saw Danny McCormick standing at the front door of the Capitol I'm ready to get in now and go file my legislation. So, yeah, I think you're right. I think he's ready to move forward on that. And I really do believe that we have a very good chance of getting concealed carry passed this next term because of Danny McCormick.
Yeah, and because the great folks that made it into the Senate this time who are not going to hamstring him.
Amen. Where the Senate is no longer will be a place, because of a lot of hard work, will no longer be a place where good legislation goes to die.
Yes, looking forward to that. Now, moving on, Dodie Horton was in House District 9. She got 60% of the vote against her Republican good old boy opponent. So we're over the moon for Dodie. I mean, Chris, she brought some really great and important legislation this past session and the entirety of her time in office.
Yeah, we've talked about Dodie so much. No need to go over any specific actions that she took in the legislature. She's just been a stalwart. I'm particularly satisfied by this. We've had Dodie on our show twice. We strongly endorsed her, got it out there on social media all over the place. And I'll tell you, Danielle, she was attacked by the entrenched establishment up there in North
Mercilessly.
Louisiana,
Absolutely
mercilessly.
mercilessly.
Tanner McGee, the outgoing, mercifully, the outgoing state representative from down in your area, actually went on local television in North Louisiana to bash Dodie Horton, and that was just the beginning of it. The entire establishment was against her. She kept her faith. She fought hard, and she won handily. What a favorite person of mine in the legislature. I'm so happy she's returning. Oh, the good that she's going to be able to do now.
Yep. Yep. I don't know. I'm just so excited for her. And I just feel like, sometimes it feels great whenever the good old boys don't get their way and, just stick it to them a little bit. We can't always lose. We can't always lose. Look at this. We won this one. Dodie won this one, and it makes me so happy for her. It makes me so happy for the anti-establishment conservative agenda. I just love it.
And she's not the only one, Danielle, who
No,
overcame the establishment.
that's
We
right.
talked about this yesterday, Blake McGuez's Senate race, but he overcame a strong establishment push against him and won overwhelmingly. These races and the victories of these constitutional conservatives should give hope to many who desire to run for office and be a lesson in the fact that it is possible to beat the entrenched establishment Republicans in these races. It can happen if you work hard and you do what you have to do to win.
Yeah, there's a formula and there's a lot of work that goes into it, but it can happen. And I think, House District number 18, where we saw Tammi Fabre running, who we also endorsed, she made it into the runoff against former Democrat, newly minted Republican Jeremy Lacombe, another good old boy if we want to talk about the good old boy network.
Yes, absolutely. Good old boy network. And Tammi Fabre was so resonated with me when she came on the State of Freedom not long before the election, several weeks, and talked about individual freedom when it comes to these emergency lockdowns and medical autonomy and the right of individuals to make those choices. I was very impressed with the way she articulated that on that issue. Happy to have supported her broadly in that race. Jeremy Lacombe, ran against Caleb Kleinpeter down there for state senate and got beat in a primary, which to me is a strong indication of just how weak Jeremy Lacombe is there. And if Tammi Fabre, with the help of us and others, is able not only to burnish her own very strong conservative credentials, but also expose Jeremy Lacombe's atrocious voting record in the state legislature, I believe that she's on target to win on November 18th. Very impressive candidate, and I think she's in good position to win.
Yep, me too. Now, House 24 was Rodney Schermerhorn, who won in a very, very strong showing versus a Republican opponent. He got 60% of the vote.
Yes, and Rodney Schermerhorn's opponent, Clarence Beebe, his well-articulated and profound campaign message was, "I'll get us our share." If you were to go around his district up there and ask him, what Mr. Beebe, do you stand for? I guarantee you that the response would be, "I'll get us our share." And it's unfortunate, that would be sort of the narrow, myopic scope of his vision as a state legislator, that I'll get all the money to our district that I can possibly get. Obviously, there's much more to legislating than that. Rodney Schermerhorn is a real conservative, stood against this busting of the spending cap on so many other issues. Very glad that Schermerhorn will be returning.
Yes. And Chris, on that idea of getting us our fair share or getting us what we deserve, that's exactly what we've talked to so many candidates about during this endorsement series. Pretty much, I would say 100%. Now, I may be mistaken or taken off guard, but I think about 100% of the candidates that we interviewed proved to us that they had a view of, yes, they serve their constituents, but with a view to the entire state, not at the detriment of the entire state. And I think we're very grateful that Rodney won this race against the guy who wants to just focus on what he can put in the hands of his constituents versus bettering the entire situation of the state.
Yes, and so many of the candidates that we endorsed, incumbents that we endorsed, all of them stood up against the spending cap, and most of them won. And I love what Dodie Horton said when she was on our show about the issue that you just brought up. And she said, "Of course, I'm for infrastructure in my district. Of course, I want to get our share of money to do the things in our district that we need to do. But I'm not willing to compromise on fundamental principles in order to fill a pothole." You remember when she said that? And I thought that really resonated with me. And that is the way I think all of these candidates that we support feel. It's not an either or to them, but there are certain fundamental principles that simply can't be compromised on for money. And they understand that and believe that. And that's why I feel so happy that these candidates were vindicated with victories after standing up against busting that cap.
Yeah, absolutely. Now on to House 25. This was Jason DeWitt, who beat a Republican opponent with 59% of the vote, and he will be taking Lance Harris's seat.
Yes, and we endorsed Jason DeWitt based substantially on Alan Seaball's recommendation because Alan knows him personally. It's up in that area, and Alan said he's a strong conservative, and you should get behind him and support him. And so we did. And to me, that is really all the authority that we need. If Representative Seaball is behind him, then we're behind him because we know
That's
the
right.
track record that Alan Seaball has. So yes, Jason DeWitt will be going into the state house and hopefully contributing to, returning our legislature to the citizens.
That's right. Now, House 28 is Daryl Desitel. He won with 80% of the vote, 81% of the vote against his Democrat opponent.
Daryl Deschatels is not. He's one of those sort of silent conservatives in the legislature. He's not all outspoken. He's not an Alan Seaball, not a Blake Miguez, but on the other extreme, he's absolutely no Joe Stagney either. He's simply solid, conservative, quiet, and tries to do the right thing. And there's certainly a place in leadership for men and women like that. Daryl Deschatel has a good record. Very glad he's returning. And perhaps one of the reasons why I'm glad that he's returning, not the most important one, is that can you imagine having to pronounce Ramondo Ramron Ramos like six or eight times without, in a hurry? It's like, Lord, can you imagine during the session and saying, I cannot believe that Ramondo Ramron Ramos once again betrayed our interest. Triple R up in here will not leave us alone.
Well, thank goodness we're not going to have to deal with that.
Oh, thank you, Lord.
Okay, House 30, moving us along. Chuck Owen won against an independent with 85% of the vote. We love Chuck Owen. He is just such a boss.
Chuck Owen is the man. That's all I can say. We played it for our listeners in the veto override session. The great, great remarks. 45 seconds of spontaneous remarks that Chuck made, encouraging the legislature to override the governor's veto of a bill that would keep enemy foreign governments from buying agricultural land in Louisiana. Chuck worked in intelligence, in the military for many years. Very few people who are in a better position to know the threats that our infrastructure face. Chuck gave it some really eloquent remarks. He's done so many good things in the legislature. Honestly, one of the few things that would have probably sent me into a spiraling depression would have been if Chuck Owen had lost. And so I'm very thankful that I was able to avoid that depression because of Chuck's overwhelming win, and I look forward to his voice again in the next term.
Yeah, me too. Now, House 31 was a surprise, that the outcome of that race. This is Jonathan Goudeau, who was an incumbent, and he was ousted by a Republican who beat him 60-40. And he's the only incumbent that we endorsed who got beat.
I don't understand that. I have spoken to a couple of people about that race. One of the possible explanations for that, Danielle, is that there is a Troy Hebert who is a good Republican who's from over in that area. He's not currently serving in politics, but he's very well known and very well liked. And according to a couple of sources that I've tapped into, perhaps a number of voters did not recognize that that was not the Troy Hebert who is popular, and they confused this guy with him, and that may have accounted for, if not accounted for the loss, at least contributed to the magnitude of the loss.
That's painful, though.
It is painful. And again, we don't know all the inner workings. And this is something we really should make clear to our listeners. Obviously, we don't know all the inner workings within a district. We don't know all of the relationships. We don't know all the internal dynamics at work. But I have to tell you that this was a surprising, but I do think it was due in part to the confusion of that name, Troy Hebert.
And let's hope that Troy Hebert that won is going to be a good representative for that district, for House District 31.
Well, one thing that Troy Hebert can rest assured of is that the Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group and the State of Freedom will be watching him closely and crediting him publicly when he does good and criticizing him publicly when he does not. So that's one thing he should be aware of.
Yeah, I'm sure he's looking forward to that already.
Oh, with great relish.
Okay, House District 39, Julie Emerson, also an incumbent. She beat her Democratic opponent with 71% of the vote. So that was just a slam dunk for her.
Yes, and one of the famous 19 who was on our Profiles in Courage, Danielle, you recall. One of the 19 who, despite enormous pressure from the establishment and the enriched special interests in Louisiana, stood against busting the spending cap. One of the 19, great courage Julie Emerson showed, and comes in at 72%. Good for you, Julie. We look forward to seeing you again in the next term. A lot of great work ahead for you.
Yes, indeed. Now, House District 43. Let me see here. Josh Carlson beat his Democratic opponent, and the outgoing representative from this seat, was Stuart Bishop, who was I think we could be fair in calling him a very establishment candidate. But Josh won with 84% of the vote.
84% of the vote. And you recall Stuart Bishop, the outgoing state rep over in the 43rd, was one of the entrenched establishment politicians who endorsed Hugh Andre to fill his seat. He went over and endorsed Hugh Andre to fill not his seat, but against Blake Miguez, who was running to fill Fred Mills' seat. So why would a constitutional conservative oppose someone like Blake Miguez? Stuart Bishop is not. Why would you be endorsing Hugh Andre, who is clearly one of the good old boys over in that district? So Josh Carlson, I believe, will be a clear improvement over Stuart Bishop. And we didn't know much about Ludwig Jalopter, but I'll tell you this, Danielle, we are not in principle opposed. And I think people need to know that the State of Freedom does not have some rigid categorical opposition to supporting and endorsing a Democrat. We will do that when and if anytime there's a Democrat who we believe is preferable to a Republican. In this case, unfortunately, Ludwig Jalopter was not. And we will see where Ludwig goes in the future. But if in the future he does have an epiphany and converts to conservative constitutional thought, be honest with you, I would be pleased to endorse Ludwig Jalopter or any other Democrat who chose to run for office. It just depends upon where they lean constitutionally. So we wish none of this is personal to us, and we wish Ludwig nothing but the best.
I knew you were going to try and see how many times you could get his name into the show today. And
Well,
you succeeded. You far exceeded my expectations.
these things are important.
All right. Not to give you another chance, we're going to move to House District 48. Beau Bellew, who's an incumbent, and he won with 85% of the vote. So I would call that a mandate.
I would call it a mandate. Very, very proud to have supported Beau Bellew, a good Republican in the legislature. Not necessarily outspoken, not a Seabaugh, not necessarily an Amadei or a Miguez, but someone who's solid across the board. And he was able to defeat overwhelmingly David Levy, yes, the Democrat from over there. So good for Beau, and a lot of good things in store for him.
Yes. Now, House District 49 didn't have the outcome we were necessarily hoping. We had endorsed David Eaton, but he lost to Jacob Landry. Jacob Landry's also, as we understand, though, pretty conservative. This was a win by Landry with 64% of the vote, and he will be taking Blake Miguez's former seat.
Yeah, and we specifically asked Blake because we don't know the area, we don't know the dynamics of the place. Who do you like over here? Who's good? And Blake said both. David Eaton and Jacob Landry are both good men, would both do a good job. We endorsed David Eaton principally because he returned our survey and made the pledge to resist any further emergency lockdowns in Louisiana. Jacob Landry didn't do that. And so David Eaton got the nod, and I'm very glad that he did. I think David is a very, very good man. And he is one of those ones like Steven Schreiber, who I believe we have, and Randy Bush, who I believe we've not heard the last of David Eaton. David Eaton will be on the political scene. He's got a great future ahead of him. And yes, we'll be keeping a very close eye on Jacob Landry in the legislature, and hopefully he does the good things that he needs to do.
Yeah, I hope he does too, and I hope we see more of him. Now, House District 53, this is my district, and Willis Trosclair did not make it into the runoff. He was our pick. He or whoever wins this seat will be filling the seat of Tanner McGee, which is, people, I think, on the conservative side of the agenda were very, very happy to see Tanner not run again. And so this race is coming down to Jessica Domingue and Dirk Guidry. Jessica got 43% of the vote. Dirk got 36. Willis got 21. And I just think, I've spoken to Willis quite a bit. He has endorsed Dirk. I think Dirk is probably the more conservative of the two. This is a tough one for me, but I think we probably will end up endorsing Dirk. So while I'm pretty bummed that Willis didn't get it because he's just so outspoken, he's very strong conservative. He is very much what you see is what you get, which is so refreshing to me. There's not a lot of political mumbo jumbo. There's not, waffling back and forth. He's definitely a speak his mind kind of guy. And I think the legislature is sorely lacking in that in some ways.
Yeah, I think it really is, and I was very refreshed being able to meet Willis, and I agree with you 100%. I mean, you never have to wonder or worry about how Willis feels because he's going to be very clear in expressing it. Willis, 20% of the vote here, Danielle. So if Willis endorses Dirk and does it in a full-throated way, and everyone who supported Willis votes for Dirk, I mean, we could be looking at a Dirk Guidry state representative here. Do you happen to know, by the way, who, if anybody, Tanner, the outgoing state rep Tanner McGee, supported in that race?
I believe he supported Jessica. Yeah,
Okay.
That's my understanding.
Okay, well,
probably not publicly, but that's kind of at least the local rumor mill is what.
Okay.
Said.
Well,
yeah.
Yeah. Well, if that's the case, then that militates very strongly against us supporting her in a runoff, and it's strongly in favor of supporting Dirk because Tanner. We could devote a whole show to Tanner's voting record. Nothing personal about him, just his record and some of the things he's done in the legislature. And then, of course, calling up to Dodie Horton's district to lambaste a fellow Republican in a district that's 6 or 7 hours away from where he lives, things like that. That's why I asked you which one he endorsed and supported there. So, yeah, I'm very comfortable endorsing Dirk Gidry in the runoff here. And I believe, to be honest with you, that with Willis's support, he's got a very good chance there.
Yeah, I think so too. And he's got a good reputation in the community. People know that they can call him and he'll pick up and he'll help them however he can. So he definitely has a good reputation for caring about the community and his constituents. So I'll move us on. I know that one's personal for me, so we took a little more time. But House District 64, Kelly Hennessy Dickerson was our pick, and she made it into the runoff with 49% of the vote versus two other Republican opponents. And this is a run for Valerie Hodges' old seat.
Absolutely. The great Valerie Hodges vacated seat. Valerie, of course, just won the state Senate race against Buddy Mincy. And Kelly Hennessy Dickerson came so very close to winning this in a primary, which is just fascinating. So glad to have endorsed her. One of the things that impressed me so much about Kelly was that she was the subject of a couple of vicious and very unfounded and unfair, like ethical allegations in the closing weeks of her campaign, which she stood up and fought back against like a lion and a warrior and refused to back down and
Good for
fought
her.
hard. And I really believe I think that this result reflects a real backfiring of that effort against her in the last weeks of that campaign. So happy to support her. And I can tell you, we're going to be doing everything we can do to help her. I think she is solid. Former school board member out there in Livingston and really had a good, sensible voice of parental rights on the school board in Livingston before she ran for state rep. I couldn't be happier about this outcome.
Yes, and we're hoping to have her on the show soon too to introduce her to all of you if you don't already know her. So we're looking forward to that. Now, House District 65, Jamie Pope suffered a pretty sizable defeat. This was a 5-way race with all Republicans, so crowded field with a lot of, different ways this could have gone. But Brandon Ivy and Lauren Ventrilla made it into the runoff, and this is for Barry Ivy's seat. And Brandon and Barry are brothers, as I understand it.
I thought you were going to say Brandon Ivory, and I was going to say Aaron Ebony, but no, we can't do that because you corrected yourself. Anyway, so Danielle, honestly, I don't really know. It doesn't necessarily surprise me that Brandon Ivy would be in a runoff. I mean, he's the brother of Barry Ivy, who's obviously well known there, seeking to take his seat. So the name recognition is clearly in his advantage. I don't know what happened to Jamie here. I really don't. Maybe she just didn't campaign. I mean, this looks like the result of someone who simply did not campaign. And I don't know. I really don't know. But Jamie Pope, we endorsed her because she clearly is the most conservative and, didn't work out for her. But I'll tell you one thing, Lauren Ventrilla, I do know, who will be going into the runoff against Brandon Ivy. I think she is a very, very good person. I know her. She's an attorney, a very gracious human being, and I think very sensible. And I am inclined to endorse her in the runoff against Brandon Ivy. Brandon, as we've said before, Barry's brother, Barry Ivy has really been a consistent rhino in the state legislature. He has done things that were so unnecessary and really has just not been a reliable conservative, to say the least. We don't know if Brandon is like Barry, but the assumption is that they are probably similar. And I think Lauren Ventrella is the best bet for us in that runoff.
Great. Well, hopefully we'll get to chat with her soon and see how things are shaping up for the runoff. Now to House District 66, Hollis Day, who we did have on the show. He did not make it into the runoff, unfortunately. He got 19% of the vote in a 5-way race, so also a very crowded field. Now, Emily Chenevere and Richie Edmonds are going to be in the runoff, and we will be supporting Emily. She's a strong conservative. This is one of those tough races. I mean, this is one of those races where we had a very tough call to make. for an endorsement because we knew Hollis and we knew Emily and we knew that they were both very strong conservatives. I think that probably what pushed us over the edge is just that we could see how strong of a fighter Hollis was. He makes that very clear in the way that he talks and in his passion and even the stories he tells. But we don't believe in co-endorsements, so we did not co-endorse, but Chris will be endorsing Emily for the runoff for sure.
And no question about it. And I'm disappointed that Hollis did not get into the runoff. I know, at least have every reason to believe, it was because misrepresentations that were made against him regarding this administrative action that's pending against him, federal administrative action. I know that they bombarded him with that to the point of putting information about that on windshields outside of a Jeff Landry event. I thought that was grossly unfair. And I think continue to believe that Hollis Bubby Day is the strongest conservative in the race. But Emily Chenevert is an outstanding human being. And I'm so happy that we will be endorsing her and hopefully having her on our show. I don't think there's any choice between her and Richie Edmonds, and we're going with Emily Chenevert all the way to the finish line.
Yeah, and she'll do great, no doubt. She presents so well. She's so polished and just a very thoughtful person. So I'm looking forward to that race. Now to House 68, Dixon McMakin. He was in a five-way race, a lot of five-way races in this stretch here between two Republicans, two Democrats, and a no party. He has advanced to the runoff versus his Democrat opponent, Belinda Creel Davis.
Yes, and this was a tough fight between Dixon McMakin and Laurie Adams, who were the two Republican favorites, obviously, in that race. We endorsed and supported Dixon because we spoke to him. He responded to our survey, and we just felt that he would be the one to lead the conservative charge in District 68. It's interesting that Laurie Adams came within 34 votes of getting into a runoff with Dixon. Dixon will go in with Belinda Davis, and we will be behind him strongly. And Dixon told us, and I'm going to hold him to this, the evening at the Louisiana Conservatives that he attended, when I told him that we were endorsing him, he looked at me and said, "Chris, I'll make y'all proud." And
Awesome.
And I'm sure that he will.
I'm sure that he will too. So I look forward to talking to him soon. We hope to have him on the show in the next week or two. So y'all be looking out for that. Now, House District 70, this was a huge disappointment to us. Jenny Seals did not make it into the runoff. I know that you probably heard her show. If you didn't, you should. You'll love her as much as we do. I mean, she is just fantastic. So she didn't make it into the runoff, but the runoff will be between the rotten Barbara Freiberg and a Democrat, Steve Myers. We've heard rumblings that a number of conservative Republicans will be coming out in support of Myers because he's vastly more conservative than Freiberg. Not that it takes very much, but that's impressive. And I think points to the fact, Chris, that look, we're here to open to anyone. This is a values-based, this is a constitutional-based metric that we have here. It's not based on the letter behind your name. If it was based on the letter behind your name, we wouldn't even be here.
We wouldn't even be here. That tells you very little in this day and age. Whether you have an R or a D behind your name, it tells you very little. I want to say something about Jenny Seals. Jenny, in her campaign, unfortunately, her campaign apparatus for weeks, right in the middle of her campaign, was basically dysfunctional. The things were not being done that should have been getting done in her campaign. And by the time LeCag got involved and the State of Freedom got involved, and we began to get all kinds of information out about Barbara Freiberg, well, it was too late for her to get into a runoff, but she still got 22% of that vote. She came 500 votes away from getting into a runoff with Freiberg. You talk about an outstanding American, and she is endorsing the Democrat Steve Myers in the runoff. Did you know that?
That is amazing. Well, I would love to talk to him, Chris, because this whole situation just fascinates me. And I think it's proof positive that it is truly about people who care about people, and it's not people who care about their special interests that they need to serve and protect.
Absolutely. And I can see if we do support Steve Myers, and which we may well, because he is a pro Second Amendment, pro life, conservative Christian. Perhaps the first text blast or whatever it is we send out will be District 70, the Rhino versus the Dino.
Well, I've heard people call him a JFK Democrat, and that inspires hope. So, anyway, stay tuned, folks, for this one. I think this will be a very, very interesting race to watch, and it may give folks in District 70, strong conservatives, a reason to vote for a Democrat and be a real rebel. So, I look forward to seeing how that race
Amen.
shakes out. Yeah, absolutely. Now, House District 81, our endorsed candidate, Jason Amato, lost to Republican Jeff Wiley, who's the former sheriff. He lost by 10%. We just love talking to Jason so much. I mean, he has a real vision, he has a passion for the area, and he has definitely the best accent we had on the entire endorsement series. I just truly enjoyed talking to him.
One of the things that I really enjoyed about that race was that that was a clean race. Jason Amato and former Sheriff Jeff Wiley made a decision early on that they were not going to go dirty, that they were not going to attack each other. They were both going to run on what positively they felt like they could do in the state legislature. And they were faithful to that by and large, and I'm very refreshed to have seen that. Jason came up short, but, getting 45% of the vote was not even particularly well known in Ascension. He's from St. James down in the Letcher area, and yet nonetheless did well in all of the parishes. And look, 1,600 votes or so short of winning that. Very proud of Jason Amato's effort. And I would be very surprised if Jason's not a candidate for something significant in the future.
Yep. I mean, he has the heart for it and the mind. So that's a dynamic combo. Moving to House District 83, Reginald Jasmine is someone we endorsed later in the game. We didn't meet him until later in the election cycle, but he was running against the incumbent Kyle Green Jr., who's a Democrat. And what a fascinating, just interesting, dynamic guy. Reginald Jasmine is pro-Constitution. He understands the foundations of this country, and he was so passionate. And I think it really burned him up to see that Kyle Green was just going to get it, get into office unchallenged. So he mounted a campaign against him, Chris, and unfortunately was not able to really, he didn't win. So that's,
Well, and to be honest with you, Danielle, we never had him on the show, but we did speak to him by phone offline, and he never really expected to win. He was not expecting to win that race. As you said, he got in the race because he was having a very hard time believing that Kyle Green would walk in unopposed with the voting record that Kyle Green has. Of course, Kyle Green's a Democrat. It's not a shock that he has a voting record he has. But I was very, very impressed by Reginald Jasmine's willingness to get into the race just so Kyle Green would have an opponent. I'm glad we endorsed him. And I'm just as impressed with you are as when we spoke to him. It's like, this is a real constitutional conservatism, an conservative, an African American Republican who really understands the issues that
a
are
veteran
a
and an
veteran
outsider.
and an outsider. It's like I was happy to have endorsed him. I'm glad Kyle Green had an opponent, and we're going to be seeing from Reginald in the future.
Yeah, I hope so. I don't think he's going to let Kyle Green's phone go unrung this session. I think he's probably going to have some thoughts to share about any number of votes that come up. So, Kyle,
No,
I'm sure you're looking forward to that.
yes, he will be ringing. Jasmine will be ringing Kyle's bell.
Yeah, 100%. Now, House District 88, Kathy Edmonston, obviously a longtime friend of the show since the beginning, beat her two good old boy recent converts to Republicanism very, very decisively right out of the gate, 64% of the vote. And I just couldn't be happier for her. I mean, not to have to go to a runoff and to just show up those good old boys. I mean, she trounced him.
Yes, and of course, she was attacked out in Ascension Parish by this blogger, Pelican Post, whatever it is out there, attacked viciously by that post, by that blogger. And then later on, before the election, the blogger, the Pelican Post, puts up another article about how Kathy Edmonston may be vulnerable against Willie Robinson and Donald the Don Scheck-Snyder. Well, he couldn't have possibly been any more wrong, because Kathy Edmonston crushed her opponents 64%. And what little credibility the Pelican Post has out in Ascension Parish should now evaporate into absolute nothingness, because they could not have been any more wrong on this election. And I am so proud of Kathy Edmonston. I'm proud of her faith, her courage. As you said, Danielle, she's an old friend of the show. She came on the show just a couple of weeks before the election. I'm so glad we were able to help her, and I'm so glad that she will be at the legislature in the next term.
Yes. I hope to see her very deeply involved, as you do, as you've mentioned before, in the education committee. As she's mentioned, I think that we have so much to gain from having her back in the House, and couldn't be more proud.
We need her as chairman of the education committee in the House, and we will be pushing for it.
Yeah, we'll put out an APB on that one. Now, House 90, Brian Glorioso made it into the runoff with incumbent Mary Dubuisson. Now, he'll have some work to do to beat her, but I think it's doable, Chris. She got 48%, he got 44%, and you've spent some time talking to him. So tell us what you think about him.
Oh, I think that he is very, very sensible. I think that he is fiscally conservative, socially conservative, and just basically has a lot of common sense, you know. And by the way, Danielle, the third candidate in that race is a libertarian, not a Democrat. So, libertarians, I'm talking about this Heidi Alejandro Smith, who got almost 9% of the vote in the primary here, is a libertarian. Well, libertarians are not necessarily only for small government, they're almost for no government. I mean, they believe that government should perform. They're like Jeffersonian philosophy in terms of how they view government. The government
Very anti-establishment.
very anti-establishment. And I would have a hard time seeing this libertarian endorsing Mary Dubuisson in a runoff
Very
here.
good point.
And we're going to make, you know what I mean? And I think that we're going to make it very clear, continue to make very clear Dubuisson's record, not the least of which is the fact that she sponsored legislation that was massively unpopular in St. Tammany to broaden casino gambling in that parish. Millions and millions of dollars were spent to bring it there, and 63% of the voters in St. Tammany nonetheless voted against it. That's just one of the things she's got going against her. I think Brian Glorioso is in a great position to take this in a runoff.
Yes, and we're looking forward to talking to him soon as well. Hopefully, we'll be introducing the listeners to him in short order. Now to House 92, this is a real gut punch. Mike Segura lost pretty badly to Joe Stagney. I don't really know what to say. It was 70-30, so not much of a run there. And I just have to say, Chris, unfortunately, I never really felt the passion for the job from Mike Segura that I wanted to see.
This is less of a gut punch for me. This is not a surprise to me, Danielle, because as nice a person as Mike Segura is, Mike didn't do what he needed to do to win. It's very, very simple. As bad as Joe Stagney is,
It's not enough.
It's not enough. He's still an entrenched incumbent. They're hard to beat, and you've got to work very hard, consistently and tenaciously to win a race like that. But Joe Stagney was vulnerable to a loss. Unfortunately, Mike was not able to get the message out there and do what was necessary to win that race. The thing that makes me the most sad is the fact that Stagney is returning to the state legislature when
That's
there
the
was
true
an
gut punch in all of this. Yeah, that's the true gut punch in the whole thing, I think.
Absolutely 100%. And we've got, I just believe that somebody is going to come along at some point and take atrocious Joe Stagney out. Just wasn't meant to be this time.
Well, we will hope for better next time. A very, very similar race to that one was in House 94, just kind of down the road, frankly. That was Charles Marsala, who we had on the show as well. A very entertaining guy, very passionate guy, and he got beaten badly by Stephanie Hilferty. She got 88% of the vote, even with her really wretched voting record.
And I think Charles Marsala, Danielle, is a very, very nice man, very principled man, very good man. But I think his race against Hilferty, as bad as she is, was similar to Segura. I don't think he did what was necessary to win. And you can't win if you're not willing to put the time, the effort, the sacrifice in to make it happen. I am saddened that Hilferty is returning to the state legislature, but it's not really a surprise to me because I don't think that Marsala did what was necessary to win. And I would tell him that. It's nothing personal, but if you're going to engage a campaign, you got to get out there, you got to work hard, and you got to be willing to do what you got to do to win. Period.
Yeah. Well, I hope we do get to see him engage civically because he really is a solution oriented guy, and I think he has a lot of great ideas that have not been brought to the legislature. So hopefully he'll be involved in some way, shape, or form. But he unfortunately will not be taking over Stephanie Hilferty's seat.
No, but he would have been a very good addition. No question, he would have been a good addition. Just like I said, didn't do what was necessary to make it happen.
Yep. Now, House 95, Shane Mack. He ran for his brother's seat and won. He's very conservative and made a very strong showing against his Republican opponent. He got 60% of the vote. The seat that is being vacated is his brother's retiring Sherman Mack's seat.
Yeah, and Sherman Mack is a very fine conservative. Sherman brought a couple of very important bills in the 2023 session that unfortunately were killed in the Natural Resources Committee, but Sherman has been a consistent. In fact, Sherman, Danielle, was the one who was competing against Clay Schexnayder back in 2020 to be Speaker of the House and lost because of
Oh, that's right.
shenanigans that you and I have talked about before, but Sherman was the conservative choice for Speaker of the House. I don't think the acorn falls far from the tree. I had a chance to meet Shane Mack. I think he's a solid conservative, thrilled that he won that race and thrilled that he will be adding to the conservative ranks in the legislature.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Now, House 103, Mike Bayham made it to the runoff with a Republican. He got 47% of the vote, and the winner of this one will take Ray Garofalo's seat.
Yes, and Mike Bayham, my brother Royal, mentioned him to me. Mike Bayham, and he is Royal knows him well and says this is a real conservative, someone who you can count on once he gets in there. He's not going to be one of these flip flopping rhinos. So I trust obviously my brother Royal Alexander as much as I trust Alan Seabaugh when it comes to these endorsements. So I'm very, very optimistic about Mike Bayham and glad he's going to be in there.
Yeah, looking forward to seeing what he's going to bring. Now, House 104, last but not least, our endorsed candidate was John Raymond. He was beat pretty decisively by Jay Galley, who is another conservative. And this again was another tough call in terms of making an endorsement. But John filled out our survey. I'm not sure. I think we knew John before the race even began. He had been up at the legislature. He had been testifying. So we just kind of knew that he was equipped to do the job, was motivated to do the job. And so that made it, in that sense, an easy endorsement. But I think Jay we anticipate him being a really great legislator.
Absolutely nothing against Jay Galley whatsoever. I believe he's a former U.S. Marine. We endorse John Raymond because we've seen John Raymond at the legislature. We've seen him there testifying passionately on issues that are so very important to conservatives, taking time out of his day, many hours out of his week to be there. And I was just always very impressed with him. I knew where he stood on all the issues. And more importantly, I knew that he was willing to act on his principles, not simply talk about them. So that's why we gave John Raymond the nod. There's no doubt that some of the issues that he was facing involving these unproven charges against him out in his district probably weighed against him winning this election. But I have no regrets about endorsing and supporting John Raymond. And we have no regrets about giving Jay Galley at this point the benefit of every doubt, and hope to see him go in and perform well under the banner of constitutional conservatism.
Certainly. Now, what can we expect in November? So there's quite a number of races left to be decided. There are 18 runoff races. 10 of those are Republican-only races. 5 of them are Democrat-only races, and 1 is a Democrat versus no party race. So as of now, we can say with certainty that there will be 70 Republicans in the next legislature. There will be 32 Democrats, and there are 3 seats yet where a party is to be determined. Just by comparison, last legislative cohort, there were 71 Republicans, 33 Democrats, and 1 independent. But as we know, and as we've said a couple times now, just on this show alone, the party affiliation means very little. It may be directional, but it's not certainly going to tell us how someone's going to vote. And maybe, Chris, I'll also just kind of recap what we said about the Senate yesterday, that there are 2 runoff races left in the Senate. One is a Republican only, one is a Democrat only. So we can say with certainty that there will be 29 Republicans in the Senate and 11 Democrats. By comparison, last legislative cohort, there were 27 Republicans and 12 Democrats. So we're edging out a little bit better than that.
Absolutely. We have some very, very important runoffs, Danielle, that we are going to be engaged in between now and November 18th. Several of them that are very important that we will be filling our listeners in. And as you said earlier, we will have some guests. Some of these candidates will be coming on our show so that they can hear or share their vision directly with our listeners, one of whom will be coming on for the second time, Tammi Fabre. And also keep in mind, Danielle, that there are several constitutional amendments that will be on the ballot on November 18th that we will also be expressing a position on as well.
Yep. And I look forward to that. Now, Chris, just as a reminder to our listeners, they can support the candidates that LeCag is supporting by giving to LeCag. And that can happen at www.lecag.org. And the P.O. Box is?
The P.O. Box is LeCag, L-A-C-A-G, P.O. Box 64952, Baton Rouge, Louisiana 70896. If you want to help advance the cause of constitutional conservatism, if you value your liberty and your freedom, if you want representatives in the legislature who are truly fighting for your interests, lower taxes, your Second Amendment rights, pro-life, your medical autonomy, roads that function, please donate to the LeCag PAC. That enables us to help these candidates to win office so that they can serve you faithfully. We are losing our freedom slowly but surely. We are fighting to get it back, and we are making great progress. Please donate to the LeCag PAC so that we could continue to build good government in Louisiana and return the legislature to you. That's what our goal is.
Yes. And I know we mentioned it at the outset, but we have been working so hard this election cycle to get good conservatives elected. And as you've heard by now, we've had some pretty significant wins. We've taken a few losses, but all in all, I think we're going to be in a much stronger position going into this session in January and then in March. So please consider helping us out. And then if you want to support the State of Freedom advertising, or even by subscribing at a low monthly dollar amount. You can do that at freedomstate.us. We really, really appreciate it. And again, just really appreciate your faithfulness to listen to us, to share the show. We just can't thank you enough for engaging with us and for being here.
If you like the state of freedom and you want to see the state of freedom continue to expand across Louisiana, please support us. Please donate. It could be some of the best money you've ever invested in any program, because you're investing not only in your future, you're investing in the future of your children, you're investing in the next generation, you're investing in liberty and in freedom, so that the state that our children and grandchildren grow up in is one that is free. And that's what we're fighting for. So please consider donating and supporting the state of freedom so that we can continue to expand across the state of Louisiana.
Yes, and we will be coming back to you shortly. I think going forward between now and the holidays, we may only do 2 episodes a week, just so we can stay engaged in the runoffs and get all of the work done that we need to do. But we also want to be a consistent voice and make sure that you get the information and the insight that you need. So going forward, I think we will be doing shows after this one on Mondays and Wednesdays. So please look forward to that. There may be some surprise bonuses on Fridays, but no promises on that just yet. But with that said, Chris, any final words?
Well, I just want to thank our listeners for being so faithful to us, for helping us to advance as far as we have come. But I'm so proud of the progress that we are making, the courage. This is episode 80. Wow. It just blows my mind. There's got to be something significant to that number. But I'm so thankful for all of our supporters. I'm thankful for the opportunities that we have every day to share the voice of freedom in Louisiana. And I have no doubt, Danielle, that not only have we made great progress to this point, but every day with courage and God's holy grace, we will take another grand step to preserve the state of freedom in Louisiana.
Amen. Let's do it. Thanks for listening to The State of Freedom. To stay on top of all the calls to action we mentioned today, just check out the show notes for the episode. If you'd like to support the show financially, visit our website at freedomstate.us. If you'd prefer to give by mail, you can send a check to The State of Freedom, LLC at P.O. Box 861, Berg, Louisiana 70343. If you own a business in Louisiana and are interested in supporting our show by advertising, please email us at info@freedomstate.us. To get involved with Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group, visit lacag.org, LACAG.org, or email Chris at chris@lacag.org. If you're enjoying the podcast, please subscribe and share it. Give us a 5-star rating in the reviews. Thanks again, everybody. We'll see you next time.